Hi everyone. So in our last session, we created this little table here that provides our descriptive statistics for the information regarding our variables. In this video, we're going to be talking all about scatter plots. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a scatter plot for our assignment that's required. We are also going to make sure that that scatter plot has a trend line, and we are going to go a little bit ahead and also add the R-squared value for our trend line. This is not required for the Module 2 assignment, but it is part of the Module 3 assignment. Since all of the information is located in the same area, it just makes sense to create a scatter plot with all of the information, which also makes life easier for you because then you can copy and paste the same scatter plot into both assignments and get full credit. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to need to do is select the data that we are going to put in the scatter plot. I am in the needed sample variables tab that we created that only has our X and Y values. What I'm going to do is take my mouse up to A, and I am going to left click, and I get the downward arrow. I'm going to left click again to make sure that I get all of the information pertaining to the X variable. While holding down on left click, I am going to drag. You'll see that my cursor changed from the downward arrow into the fat plus sign. I'm going to drag over and make sure that I capture everything in column B, which pertains to our Y variable. Then I'm going to take my finger off of the left click and I get the downward arrow again, but all of our data is selected. Now I'm going to go into the Insert tab, and then there's a charts area here. We want to create a scatter plot, but to make sure that we create the specific chart that we want to create, I'm going to go where it looks like a scatter plot, but instead of just clicking the button, I'm going to click the arrow to the side. I'm going to left click, sorry. So when I left click, I see that I have a lot of different options. What I want is the graph with just the dots. So as we see here, we have a graph with just the dots. We also see that it populated correctly. Our X variables, which are our median square feet, are shown at the bottom where our X variable should be. And our Y variables are the median listing price, and they are shown as they should be as well. Our title does need a little bit of work, but we can work on that with no problem. So the first thing we're going to do is add axis labels. Axis labels allow us to show exactly what our Y and what our X correspond to. Right now they're just numbers without context, and that's not very helpful. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this little plus sign that's by our graph, and we are going to choose axis titles. We're just going to go ahead and check right there. Now, as you can see, we do have axis titles for our Y and we have axis titles for our X. So right now, what we want to do is we want to select our axis title by quickly left clicking. And we see that we have this box here with the little blue circles on the side. And I'm going to show you a little trick. What we're going to do is go in our formula bar. So we're going to left click in our formula bar, make sure our cursor's there. We're going to hit the equal sign, and then we are going to select cell A1, which corresponds to our X values, and we are going to hit enter. And see how it just nicely populates that information into our graph? That is what we want to avoid having to type extra information and also retyping that stuff. In my case, I don't want any typos, so I try to make it as easy as possible. Again, we're going to go to the Y-axis and we're going to click. We're going to get this box around with the little blue circles. We're going to go up to the formula bar. We're going to left click, get our cursor there, hit the equal sign, and then click the column header for our Y, which is located in B1, and then we're going to hit enter. And again, beautifully populated. To fix our title, we can do one of two things. We can double click in this area and manually fix it. But I like the quick fix of actually doing it within my data sheet. So if I do need to change it, it will automatically change if I change the cell. So what I'm going to do is click in column C1. I'm going to left click, and I'm going to actually create a title. I'm going to say scatterplot of median price let's say median listing price to be specific, and median square feet. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over my title, left click once, and then I get the box with the little blue dots on the edges. I'm going to left click in the formula bar, hit equal, and then select by left clicking C1, which is where my title is, and pressing enter. And there we have it. It's automatically populated. Because I'm generally paranoid, what I will do now is I will left click in A1, and when I have that fat plus sign, I will drag all the way over to C1. I'm going to go up to Review tab, and I'm going to check my spelling again. It tells me I'm good to go, so no worries there with typos. All right, so now we have a scatter plot, but it's not complete. We do have our labels and a title, but we don't have our trend line, and we don't have our regression equation or our R squared, as I talked about. But creating that is simple. What we're going to do is we're going to go on the outer box of our scatter plot, and we're going to just select it to get our menu back up. We're going to go to the plus sign again, and we're going to do a check mark by the trend line. We are also going to follow this little arrow and left click to get more options. We are going to scroll down and get more options. There are a few things we need to check and change. So first, we want to check and make sure that we're actually doing a linear trend line, which we are. It is highlighted. Now we're going to check that we want to display the equation on the chart, and we want to display the R squared value. Now, as you can see, it came up where the trend line is, and it's very, very hard to see. So what you want to do is go back to the graph and hover over this information. Once you get your cursor that looks like the arrow that I'm showing now, you can move the actual equation and the R squared value. So I'm going to left click and hold and drag this information someplace that's more visible. And that works nicely. Some of you may not have information here that's completely legible. So in the event that you do not, I am going to show you how you can go ahead and make these changes. Right now though, as you can see, it seems like the information is not really popping out much. It's the same color, so it makes sense as far as the color scheme, but it's kind of hard to see. So I want to change that. I'm going to hover over to text options, and I am going to hit this arrow next to text fill, and you can see that there's color here. I'm going to change my color. I personally like purple, but you can change whatever color you'd like. And then it pops out a little bit more. But what about these numbers that I talked about? Sometimes they're going to look fine, and sometimes they will look like they're a little truncated. For example, you may have two numbers, an E, and then a negative sign, and then a few values. That's not exactly what you want. You want to see the actual number. So to make that change, we will have to go ahead and format these numbers. To do that, you can easily left click, and as you can see, my cursor is right here, and that means that I will be changing that number. So to do that, we're going back into label options, and now we see that our numbers are up. Right now it says general, and we want to change that to a number. Remember, we're actually dealing with money here, so we want to have two decimal places. Personally, I don't recommend formatting things in the form of currency here because it may or may not work in your favor. For example, if your y-intercept, meaning your second number in your equation, is negative, it may turn it red and have parentheses, and you don't want things like that. You want it to be formatted as a number with 2 decimal places so there's no confusion later. Now, we have that formatted as money. Our slope already has 2 decimal points, but if you wanted to change that, you could. And then this one is our r squared. I'm not sure if I can change just this value, but I'm going to try. Now I'm going to say that I want to have that to have 4 decimal places. That changes everything. So that's not really going to work for us because, as I stated before, our information is related on currency. Our y value is the listing price, and we only need 2 decimals to be appropriate. So I'm going to change this back to 2. Okay, so now we have an equation in which we have our numbers displayed very clearly in a font, we have our numbers displayed very clearly in a color that we can see, and we also have our r squared. So our graph is complete. This graph contains a trend line and all the information that you will need for the paper in week 2 and week 3. So you can copy it and get full credit for both papers. Now, I did say that we were going to talk about correlation, which is the component for paper 3 that is not something that we can easily add to the graph, but we can easily calculate it. To do that, I'm going to go to one of our empty cells. I, again, am a very big stickler for labels, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put correlation here. All right, and then space, equal sign, so that we can see clearly what we're talking about. I'm going to go up between C and D, get my little cursor that allows me to widen my cell, and make sure that I widen it so that you can see all of correlation. I'm also going to highlight this cell and another. I think Excel needs 2 cells highlighted to actually do the spell check. I could be wrong about that. It might just be my own superstition, but that's what I do. So I'm going to check the spelling again, and we're good to go there. Now to calculate the actual correlation. To do that, we're going to press the equal sign as we do in front of every Excel formula when we start. And then I'm going to type CORR, and then that tells us the correlation coefficient. Double click on the formula that I need. And then it's saying that it needs an array, 2 arrays actually, to calculate. This is simply going to be our X values, and this one's going to be our Y values. So to do that, I'm just going to select all of my X values, and then comma, and then select all of my Y values, and then enter. And that's our correlation. Just to check, I'm going to also calculate our R squared. We have it in our table, or excuse me, we have it in our scatter plot, but just as a good check to make sure that our correlation is right, those 2 numbers should match. So to do that, I'm going to do equal, and then I'm going to select my correlation, and then I'm going to hold shift, press the number 6 to get the caret, and then I'm going to press 2 and then enter. And we see that our number matches. We have 0.059. When we round that, we get 0.06, which is what we have here with our 2 decimal places. So now we have all of our information. We created a scatter plot. We made sure that our scatter plot had its axes. We made sure that we had a good title. We have our regression equation line, and we also have our R squared as well as our correlation. Now, a few notes about the simple regression line. The slope is going to be the number in front of the X. So in our case, or in the case of this example, it is negative 211.51, which means that for every increase of square footage on a property in our sample, our property value actually loses $211.51. Now, our y-intercept is the second number in our equation that's not in front of the x. That states how much a property would be if it had nothing built on it. So pretty much land only, a property with no square footage. In that case, it's telling us that a property with no square footage, so a property that contains only land, is going to be worth, according to our sample, $928,263.62. That's how you would read the intercepts for this equation. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or to let me know in the discussion boards. I monitor them regularly. It's always good to put general questions in the discussion boards in case your classmates have the same question. Again, I hope this was helpful.